Hello, everyone. This is Uncle Louie coming at you with podcast episode 16. The title of this particular episode is Isolation and Solitude. Now, with this particular episode is more along the lines of it's like part advice and part just a little bit of perspective for those non-solo people that you know could provide an explanation, like if you have a friend or a family member or someone that's always by themselves, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're like in a bad way, or that they're depressed, that they're sad, or there's something wrong with them. That by no means is that, should you assume that that's the case. So this episode is more to kind of just give a little bit of advice on that for the people that want to try it, because it's something that you can get into, but typically it's more along the lines of something you were born with. So without further ado, this is Uncle Louie, and let's get on started. So isolation and solitude. Now these are two things that have been synonymous with each other, that have come in a pair, and for at least as long as I can remember. Every time someone talks about being isolated, they talk about being alone, or being, going solo, or being in solitude, and vice versa. Now, to really go underway with this, and I think it's pretty important for all of you to understand what isolation and solitude means. Now, I'm not going to give you a dictionary perfect definition. I'm going to give you my best interpretation of that definition, so that you can see it in a way that best conveys my message towards all of you. So for me, isolation and solitude, meanings behind it, or definitions, personal definitions. Well, when it comes to isolation, I honestly have, it's a two-parter, because for me, a lot of these, like many words, have multiple meanings, or they can be used in different ways depending on the intent or the purpose that it's being used for in a given sentence or phrase. So when it comes to isolation, I often think one of two things, or two things in general. I either think of, you know, singling out a particular thing, just to make it simple, singling out a particular thing, or in all essence of the word, isolating, or like I mentioned, singling out a particular aspect, principle, object, or characteristic from something else, or from a group of other things. Singling out something in particular aside from the majority, or singling it out from the majority, or the larger populace. Now, solitude is a little bit of a, it's also a double meaning, and I forgot to mention the second one for isolation. I do. Let me get to that first. I barely realized that I kind of skipped it. So the first one for isolation was singling out a particular entity or thing from a large populace, or a large group. The second one, when it comes to isolation, is making the effort, or having it come naturally, that you expel, or in a way block out your surroundings. So the second definition of isolation is more, it's very personal, in the sense that you're making that decision, that the definition becomes an action, not just a description, or I believe it's called an adjective. Yeah, I believe that's what it's called. Grammar people, post down in the comments if I was correct, if that's what that was the intent. But yes, instead of it becoming a description, just a descriptive word for a person, or a characteristic, it becomes the action itself. It becomes the action. And I think that's very important because a lot of these words, you've often heard the phrase that, words can be powerful, or the pen is mightier than the sword, which means, words can be as powerful as actions, but vice versa. Actions, in my personal opinion, from my experiences, actions speak volumes more than words. That's just my opinion, and honestly, it varies from person to person. If we're being a little bit more honest, based off of some research that I've done before, I've come to the conclusion, come to some scientific findings that obviously the male and the female brain are kind of hardwired a little bit differently. So there's different aspects as to kind of what how they perceive things, the perspective of things. That's why typically men have a hard time understanding the thoughts of women, and vice versa. Women sometimes have a hard time understanding the ideas, or what the thoughts that are going through men's minds. And in that particular research, they were talking. This particular scientist who was presenting his research was talking about how with men we're more based off of action, and with women they're more, for them the value of things is based off of words. So for women, words are the high, the I guess you could say, if we're going by a store or like a business, words to them are currency, and for us it's the action that's the currency. So just so you know that like I said, for me, me being a guy, and I see both perspectives, I see both sides, and I hold both words and action and action in high value. But personally, I think actions do speak much, well beyond volumes of words, because anyone can say they're going to do something, or that anyone can say anything, but at the end of the day, like I mentioned, at the end of the day, it's what they actually decide to do, to physically go and do. You could say you want to take out the trash 100 times, and you say, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna go take out the trash in 5 minutes, or 10 more minutes." But I think there is a big difference between saying I'm gonna do it and never getting around to it, or actually just getting up and throwing the trash right then and there. Like I said, personally, I think actions speak volumes more than words, but they both do hold their significance. It just depends how you use it, and the type of person that's utilizing either of these two subject matters. So that was the kind of a long kind of description and explanation into the isolation. So now let's go on to solitude, which some of the principles that I just talked about, with the words and the actions, of a word itself. It has like a particular meaning, and then it can also be used as an action. Not all of them, just some words can be used as actions. Depending, it's all up here. It's all up here. But now solitude. So with solitude, first thing that comes to mind in terms of personal definitions, is kind of wanting to kind of get in touch with your own self. That's my personal definition when I think of solitude. I think, if it comes to a particular scenario, I think there's this person, and if you have just solitude running through your mind, then I think solitude. Now there's a person that wants to get away from it all. They want to kind of collect their thought. They want to hear the peace and quiet of, they want to be able to hear themselves speak. That's not to say that they might not go to an area that has some noise, whether it be nature or a park or a city, whatever whatever fancies you. But it's that kind of detachment. It's that detachment. It's that detachment from from all these factors in your life, or all these factors around you, that kind of just seem to be so draining, complicated, confusing, aggravating, saddening, joyful, just all of these things. I mean, the thing that I feel it's best to realize for as an individual is that, as great and as awful as a lot of these feelings or emotions might be, it does take its toll. It doesn't come without a cost. Everything you've ever experienced in life comes at a cost, either to you or to someone else. And it's in a way the law of the universe. It's like someone always has to be paying for it. Nothing is free. Nothing is free. There's always somebody paying for whatever it is that you believe you're enjoying, or you're getting depressed over, you're getting angry over, or that you're muttering about, or kind of wallowing in that state of whatever emotion you may be in. Someone's always paying for it. So in this case, when I say someone paying for it, I mean, when it comes to solitude, it's a way to kind of pay, like you're paying with your own effort, through your own effort and time, and a little bit of energy. You're paying to, in a sense, recharge your battery, become one with yourself, relax, kind of listen to what you're saying, listen to what your body's telling you, not focusing on anything else, becoming, going into the direction of becoming the action of solitude. It's the action of solitude, and this is where the second meaning comes in. The action of solitude is that you're casting it all out. Similar to isolation, to the action of isolation, solitude is, doing a similar thing, but more specifically, solitude is saying the audio for everything else is off, the picture for everything else is off. All that's left, all that I'm going to pay attention to, is myself. Get in touch with what I am, who I am, what I'm doing, where I'm going, all of those things. So this action, like I mentioned, it's very similar to the action of isolation. Very, very similar. But there are differences. And in this case, the difference being that with isolation, you're secluding yourself, not negatively secluding, but you're just taking yourself out of that crowd, kind of becoming more individualistic. And with solitude, you're focusing on yourself. You're focusing on finding some kind of answer to what your body and what your mind is telling you. It's a little bit on the long stretch for some of you who are listening. Maybe this might not be something so clear or easy for you to understand, but I hope that you're at least following along, and that you're able to at least pick out a couple of things that for you to keep up with me so far. So now that we've gone through the definitions, or my personal definitions for isolation and solitude, now to move on to an explanation. And this explanation is a very important and crucial part, besides the introduction of the definitions. But the explanation is basically giving you the insight into a person who enjoys or who employs the definition and the or like the definition and the action of isolation and solitude. Because now, I've already mentioned the action behind the word itself, the words themselves, and the definition from the words themselves. So now we're coming to the point where we're going to be discussing what is like the reason or what's going through the mind of the one employing the action and the definition of isolation and solitude. So this one kind of more comes from a lot of personal experiences, because I love kind of isolating myself from a lot of people at a good amount of the time. It's not an everyday thing, or it's not all the time, 24/7. I do enjoy conversing and having fun with other people, with friends and family and whatnot. But I understand myself well enough to know that I need a good amount of isolation and solitude to kind of rebuild my batteries, recharge my batteries, rebuild my mind, rebuild myself. Because it's not always easy. And, I'm more than sure that there are a lot of you out there that are similar to how I am, that you have to have some isolation and solitude, in a sense privacy, to continue functioning at your best, to clear your head, clear your mind, and become relaxed, truly relaxed. Not that I'm gonna lay down for a couple of minutes and then wake up relaxed. No, like truly relaxed. Really getting through the questions, the all of the troubles and the curiosities that are going on within your mind throughout the day. This is the time to settle it. This is the time to find your answers. And I find that, for people who are in the isolation and solitude kind of path like me, it's best to just work on it on your own. Not to say that you can never, call up a good friend or a trusted person, to help you out with certain answers. And it's allowed, and it's a good thing. You get a difference in perspective, but it's best to figure it out yourself. Finding the answer, that's the fun of it. That's the challenge of it. I mean, I love fun and I love challenges, so maybe that's just particular to me or a very select few, but I think it's best and it's more valuable. Now, this is something that's not just pertaining to me, but in essence, it's always much more valuable and more meaningful if you find the answer yourself. You don't have to rely on someone else to just tell you exactly what it is or how it is. So, isolation, solitude, behind the person, um, is I guess a better way of saying it. Behind, how there's behind the music, go behind the talk about the history of the band, or the story behind the band. Well, this is behind the person, isolation and solitude edition. But yes, isolation and solitude do provide a lot of comfort for for some individuals out there. And the one thing that the ones who don't condone these types of practices or these types of actions, who view it in a very negative perspective, in a very cynical and pessimistic perspective, you have to understand that just because somebody wants to be alone or wants to be isolated or wants some solitude, that does not mean that there's something wrong with them. I've had this problem myself, that not many understand. They don't make the effort. They just assume, because it's something they don't understand, that it's got to be something wrong, because they don't want to look into it. And whatever their methods of looking into it just end up being self-assumptions based off of nothing, just imagination. And that's the honest truth. That's how it always, almost always is. It's really never based off of good research or good judgment of character. It's always based off of just pure imaginative assumptions that really have no basis for fact of anywhere besides their own minds. So anyway, going back to it, just because someone likes to be isolated or to be alone or to be by themselves or to do things on their own, that does not mean that there's something wrong with them. And if you're a person who believes that if you see someone by themselves that there's something wrong with them, or that automatically that there's something wrong with them, then this message is particular to you. Don't judge. Don't see it as a pessimistic thing, because oftentimes the isolation and the solitude is there for a reason. Now, I'm not saying that every single person out there who you see isolated and alone is has the intent of doing that. I'm not saying, because there are people that aren't in a good way or don't have a lot of luck, or don't have certain traits that make them stand out or make them be friendly, so it's often difficult for them. But there are a good number of people that just like to be alone, they like to be by themselves. And I don't think it's particularly fair for one to assume the worst when it comes to these type of qualities and traits. I mean, if you go back to pretty much everything that a person has and will be taught from an early age on up until the point of good consciousness, I just want to, give a safe era of years, like the teen years. You're basically raised to believe that if you want to be isolated, if you want to be alone, if you want some solitude, or if you're by yourself, that there must be something wrong with you, that there is no other logical explanation other than there's something wrong with you. You're depressed, you're stressed, you're angry, like just nothing but the negative. And I personally don't understand why that is. Why is that always the connotation that loneliness, or not loneliness, but aloneness or isolation or solitude is always associated with? I mean, no one ever says, oh look, that person's smiling, there must be something wrong with them. I mean, I guess now maybe it's becoming a little bit more common, but it's only when you do something in excess. But how come no one ever says, oh look, the person's smiling and having a good time, there must be something wrong with them? How come no one says that? Because that's what you were built on. If you see someone happy and smiling and laughing, then it's always assumed that they're having a good time, or something good is happening, or anything positive. The positive feelings that are attached to it, the positive perspective that's attached to it. So, in a way, in my own way at least, everything that I'm telling you and everything that I'm kind of explaining, it's my way of trying to spread the word out there that being alone or isolating or being in solitude, or someone detaching themselves from a larger group, purposefully, that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them. Often and almost always, if they intended to do so, it's because they want to recharge. They want to, be one with themselves. They want to be alone. They want to relax. They don't want to worry or think about anything else. And some of these people, that go alone, they just don't want to have the pressures of judgment put upon them, or the pressures of doing something that they don't want to do, or acting in a way that is not normal for them, or acting in a way that's just draining for them. That's just some, not necessarily mine, but that's just some of those, let's call them loners. Loners is another word, negative connotation typically, but I see it as a good thing. A loner is not a bad word. It's not a sad word. It's actually a very good word in my opinion. Loner is someone who has a very good eye, a very good soul, a very good spirit for the details in life, the finer things in life. And for anyone out there that disagrees, well, you have your thoughts, I have mine. Anyway, let's continue. It's a little bit warm where I'm at. Yeah. It's a good thing I have a little bit of some iced tea. Yeah, sorry about that. It's just a little bit heated, but yes, that's kind of that's a little bit of the perspective of delving into the mind of a loner. I'll refer to isolation and solitude. People who prefer that, I'll refer to them as loners in a positive way, in a positive connotation, in a positive context, because it's a positive word. It could be negative, but just like every word can be positive and negative. There's always that little duality of things. So don't just assume the worst. If there's any big tips or advice that I could give anyone in particular, any of the non-loners out there, for your loner friends or loner acquaintances, one of the biggest tips of advice is don't assume that just because that they're alone or that they choose to be alone that there's something wrong with them. I think that's in every sense the most insulting thing that you can do for them, as opposed to degrading yourself, or in a sense making you look worse in their eyes. And if you want a little bit more explanation, then I will give it to you as to why I said that. Don't, when you assume, and this is coming from the mind of a loner himself, because I am one. I have my own traits and quirks, but I am a loner in the end. And when you assume, or when you assume there's something that there's something negative about the loner, automatically what some loners think is, this person thinks I am not a good person. They think that I'm not worth as much as everyone else. That's just, so these are some ideas. These aren't all, they're not always, all of them are not always going to pertain to one individual. Some of these will apply, some of these won't, just so you know ahead of time. But sometimes they perceive, the loners perceive that type of negative connotation for them being loners. They view it as the other person, thinking less of them, that they're of less value, that they're worthless, not in a pathetic sense, but that they're not worth as much as they thought they were to them, or that they're so close-minded that they're not willing to accept things that they just don't understand. And that kind of ties along with the next one, which is, they're very stubborn in whatever it is that's going through their mind, or whatever they believe in, that they're unwilling to kind of learn more about what's out there, learn more, accept things. They're not very accepting, which in turn kind of leads you to believe that they're just not good people in general. There's nothing as bad as having, a friend or a very special person that just doesn't accept anything. That they're very negative and they're always assuming the worst out of people, out of others. I know plenty of people like that, plenty. There's no shortage of them in the world, and it's sad to say that there is no shortage of them. I wish there were. I wish there were more people that were, not as judgmental or pessimistic, but that's just how the world is right now. You can try to change it, and if you make the attempt, I think you can do it. But just be realistic in your goals. Just an extra little tangent tip. But yes, or some other traits, some other, thoughts that go through a loner's mind when you view their actions pessimistically or negatively. It could be along the lines of, in at the core of it, it's really just, you know, it's in a sense like you don't trust me, you don't believe me, you don't think I'm worth that much, or do you think I'm so worthless that I'm depressed? Or do you think I'm so worthless that I can't handle whatever it is that, whatever's in your mind, whatever type of obstacle I'm facing, you think I'm so worthless and so pathetic that I can't handle it? These are just some of the thoughts that run through the loner's mind. And I will say that loners out there, I'm willing to even to bet. I'm willing to just bet my faith in you, the listener, the loyal Louis, and that if you're a loner, you will agree with at least the last couple of thoughts that I mentioned. Like I guarantee it that if you're a loner and you're a viewer, and even if you're not subscribed, if you're a viewer, if you've watched this video and you are a loner, or there's a part of you that is a loner, you will agree with most of what I just said, with the whole perspective thing and viewing loners in a negative connotation or in a negative context. But yes, it's the truth. It's the truth, and it's something that the non-loners have to learn, and they have to learn to compromise. They have to learn to compromise and stop being so stubborn, so that you can progress with your relationship with the loner. And I'm not just speaking about romantic relationships, but it could be any kind of relationship, whether it be friendship or family based or acquaintance or professional. You have to learn to compromise, and I think that's something that's a very useful skill and characteristic or a good trait to have as a person. That's not to say that everything should be compromised, but in this case, when it comes to the loners, to the isolation and to the solitude and how they view it, I think it's fair to say that it wouldn't be so troubling to kind of compromise something there, and learn to accept how they view things, as long as it's not killing them or as long as it's not affecting them negatively. And when I say affecting negatively, that does not mean that you automatically come up or imagine negative things just so that you can you can be right. That's to say, if they're not showing signs of negative behavior or negative outlooks or bleak outlooks or perspectives on life or on anything else, then what's the problem? Don't make things up to try to pacify your own sense of self-righteousness and always being right. Because to be honest, if you are like that, if you always want to be right, and if you're so stubborn that you're not willing to accept other things, you're going to end up alone and very, very, very sad. But again, don't judge loners. If anything, get to know them, get to see what kind of person they are, whether it be a man, a boy, a woman, a girl, male, female, whatever. Get to know them. Get to know the true story as to why they do it. Some of them will do it because they're sincerely depressed, or that they're angry about something and they just kind of want to cool off, or that they're a little bit, confused about something in their lives that they just need some alone time to figure it out, or they could just easily just do it out of the purpose of doing it, out of, with the intention of doing it purposefully, being alone, just to recharge their batteries, to kind of just get away from the noise, not necessarily specific sound noise, but just the noise of it all, the noise that happens to be a person, their thoughts, their presence even, just to get away from all of that, to get away from all of that noise, that outside noise that doesn't come from our own selves, that's very distracting, that's very draining, And that's just one way to put it. There's many ways to put it out there, and I'm more than sure that this is definitely not something new. This is something that I feel many others have talked about. It's just that there's not a lot of content out there for it. It's mostly just always the negative connotation or the negative context of it, and I'm here to, my job for this particular video, aside giving a very good good content that can help someone out there, because number one is always to, if I come up with an episode that has to do with a particular topic that can help someone, then I want to help someone out there. Even if you're feeling frustrated, if you're in a situation where you're that loner and you're not being viewed as in a very positive way, just watch this video. I'm there with you, man. Practically every loner faces this. It's almost like the Salem witch trials. It's like burn the witch, burn the loner. It's like prosecute them, see them in a negative context. So you're not alone. You are not alone. There are others out there. There are plenty of others. You just have to, open your eyes and try to find them, because they are out there. People that will help. People that will help, and not just that, but, if anything, you can be assured that, just by watching this episode, if you're a loner out there, that, I'm there with you. I'm riding that wave with you. It's not easy. It's not always easy. Sometimes it can be a simple thing as just ignoring it, but sometimes, it gets to you. And all the negativity just piles up from so many different factors and angles that it becomes, overwhelming. But, don't listen to it. Don't take it in. Brush it out. Find your isolation. Find your solitude. Get away from it. And trust me, it will make the biggest difference in the world. It will. And I would recommend a good couple of hours of doing that. If you can only manage a couple of minutes, that's fine. Whatever you can manage, but it's best to have a couple of hours to to uh, to recharge, to become yourself, to let go of all of that baggage and that burden that's being thrown on you, because it's not meant to be thrown. And just so you know, if you're a loner and someone does that to you, where they see you in a negative context, they're just showing they're not worth that much. They really aren't. I don't care if they're your best friends or if they're your family or whatever. Just because that they're your best friends or they're your family, that doesn't automatically give them a right to be high priority, or that doesn't automatically give them the best the best assumption, or the best qualities in the world. Everybody's the same. We're all human. We're all people. We all make mistakes. We're not perfect. No one is. And whoever thinks that they are, or that they're close, very conceited, very narcissistic, and obviously in deep denial, because we're not perfect. And that's what makes us great. The imperfections. And that's not to say that every imperfection is great, but imperfections that aren't deadly, they're something to make us stand out and make us a little bit unique. Make us unique in a sense that, makes it fun to get to know someone. Makes them interesting. But yes, as I mentioned, just because someone is something that should be something else, just because family and best friends or close friends are viewed as being the highest priority, that doesn't mean you have to make them your highest priority. This might sound a bit pessimistic, and again, this is a kind of different type of mindset, a different way of thinking that, I'm surprised many people I've known throughout the years have the capability of thinking like this, but because they've been indoctrinated with all of this whole, like, family means everything. You always have your best friend, or blah blah blah. They're so stuck in that traditional system of values that they just stick with it. But I've gone a little long enough. So without further ado, this is the end. Here's my challenge question. Are you a loner? That's just my challenge question. Are you a loner? And if you are, give me a characteristic about yourself that makes you a loner. And without further ado, I mean, that's all that there is to it. If you like it, like and subscribe, and leave a comment on the video down below if if you're interested in just having a conversation with someone, with me or with someone else about whatever it is you're going through. And don't forget to you know and don't forget to again, going back, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell icon just to be notified of the more recent videos that I upload. And this is just Uncle Louis saying good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Have a good one. Catch you on the next one.